couple of weeks ago, Nootropics Depot put out a video on Greg Doucette's turkesterone products, including discussing the controversy that came from them testing his products a couple of years ago and discovering that there was not as much turkesterone as was claimed on the label. To Greg's credit, he nearly immediately addressed the issue by changing the name of the product to reflect what was actually in it, adjusted the labels, and sought out new sources for turkesterone, as well as, with help from his researcher Marwan, found ways to increase absorption. Now, I want to give credit to Marwan because he's been in contact with me over the last couple of years. As I would review their products and compare to mine, he would comment. We had some private conversations and some public ones here on YouTube. It's no big secret. He has a lot of good information to offer. And he was the one that introduced me specifically to sodium caprate, which I use now, in addition to 2 other complexing methods. So I want to give credit where credit's due. That was a wonderful suggestion. It has been very good for increasing the potency of our products and for HTLT's products. I would say at this point that we have pretty much gone 2 separate directions. I want you to take a look at this post on one of my videos from a while back where I was comparing our products, and he points out some very interesting things. As you can see here, he's talking about some of the other aspects of the plant products that are actually adding to the health benefits. There is a high percentage of iridoids and other compounds in the full spectrum extract that makes the experience of taking Turk Builder something that feels like a nootropic. Based on some of the unique effects some have experienced, increased hunger, decreased need for sleep, we hypothesized that there could also be an orexogenic component in this extract, as it shares some of the effects of orexin A agonists. The focus of my products the entire time has always been on maximum anabolism and has always been on maximum benefits in the gym, see. Now, what I feel that they're doing is taking a full spectrum approach, which I think is appropriate given the qualities of the substance that they found with their extract and their sources. And I think that's a wonderful thing. But I'm not going to be comparing my plant sterile ecdysterone products to their products anymore, really, because we're doing kind of 2 different things at this point. They're taking a more overall approach. There's nootropic effects and so forth and so on, which I think are fantastic. I talk about all this to say, essentially, we're at a fork in the road. We're not running parallel with just trying to find a potent plant sterile at this point. I'm ratcheting down on the anabolic aspects of it, as evidenced by what I'm about to talk about with the injectable. And Marwan is focused on the overall aspects, the nootropic aspects, the decreased need for sleep, some of the other health benefits, and that comes from actually utilizing other aspects of the plant. That here's the plant sterile concentrate, and then here's some of the other aspects of the plant that will lead to that. The concentrate that I'm buying is so concentrated that there's only a very minimal amount of this other aspect, okay? And I'm okay with that because I actually filter a lot of that out so that I can ratchet down just on the effects of the ecdysterone, turkesterone, alpha ecdysterone, etc. From the beginning, I've been interested in plant steriles just for their anabolic effects. And this is the study, I'm going back to the well on this one again, that really got me started on it as far as how it acts in the system and how it exerts its effects, and also what dosing to use. And I want to put a shout out to Yazid again for cluing me into the dosing conversion chart that showed that we need about 80 milligrams per day for a 100 kilogram bodybuilder. Well, that's me essentially. I'm 220 pounds right now. And so theoretically, I would need to inject 80 milligrams a day to match the studies for what was injected into rats into this study. Along the way, here's the issue that presented itself. The rats are injected with peanut oil and pure DMSO. It's just a nasty concoction just to get it in there. They didn't care about the pain. They didn't care about any issues they would cause with the rats. Ecdysterone is very insoluble in water, and it's absolutely insoluble in oil. Okay, so what they're doing is using a huge proportion of DMSO to get that to work, and that's not really the healthiest thing to inject that kind of volume of DMSO into your body. So I never went that route. What I did was try to find ways to make it more water soluble so that it would be made into a usable injectable. I found that the same complexing process that I start with a cyclodextrin actually allowed it to be up to 100 milligrams per milliliter in a standard water-based concoction. But I found that the pain and was less, and the dissolving of the bolus was slower when used subcutaneously if I put it into a hydrogel solution instead of a thin water base where it just dissipates quickly and it's in and out of your system in 3 or 4 hours, or 6 or 8, or whatever it would be. It's in a hydrogel, which is thick. You inject it into your fat and it slowly releases over time, similar to the oil-based oxytocin and how that was so much more effective than water-based. So recently, me and a few other home researchers have been experimenting with the various hydrogel formulas and things like that I've come up with. It occurred to me, why am I sticking with 100 milligrams on this? I did a run of it. I reviewed it. I talked about it. The video is somewhere linked. By using the slow-release hydrogel at 100 milligrams per milliliter and getting roughly 80, maybe 90 milligrams in the system a day, you don't want to take a 1 milliliter shot subcutaneously. You want to break that up into 2 small shots. So that's what I do, and I would get somewhere in the neighborhood of 80 to 100 milligrams a day. I did that for 10 days, and I found that it worked very similarly to low-dose, slow-release oxytocin. All the familiar signs were there. The full muscles, very similar nootropic effects to what I see with oxytocin, but a slightly different feel, if I'm being honest. But it was very interesting, and I filled out, my muscles were rounded, everything was familiar, okay? Could I make this more concentrated to where we don't have to inject a large amount, but could we inject like a half a mil a day and double that effect and get it right up to the strength of something like an oxytocin? So I got to work on an updated formula. I was able to successfully get that to 300 milligrams per milliliter, and I was very excited. I gave the higher concentrated version a run for several days and found that it was helping me to recomp. It was very clear that it was powerful. The nootropic effects, again, very similar to oxytocin, slightly different feel, but you can tell the dose was higher. You could tell that the muscles were fuller. I was seeming to burn fat. My abs are more defined. So I like the results of it. Here's the issue with it. And I want to put this out here because, look, technically, my product is topical only. That's top of the skin. I know there are guys that are going to inject it. That said, I can't tell you what to do. But this stuff is so concentrated and so thick that, number one, you only need a very little bit to do the job. Number two, because it is so thick and so concentrated, after about 2 days in the injection site, there is some knotting, there is some pain. And I think that's due to just after everything's left, all the, benzyl alcohol and the different things that are needed to keep everything in solution, have just irritated that little area of skin. Think about if you were using like an underground testosterone at 500 milligrams per milliliter. Here's the thing, this is 300 milligrams per milliliter, but in order to get that 300 milligrams in there, we have to use 600 milligrams of HPBCD, the cyclodextrin, to encapsulate it and make it water soluble. Now, typically, the absolute saturation point of most liquids is 1,000 milligrams or 1 full gram per milliliter, and we're already at 900 milligrams. See where I'm going with this? Now, add in 30 milligrams of genistein, 30 milligrams of DHEA. I'll get into why those are in there in a second. And we are right at the fringe. In fact, along the way, making this formulation, I found batches that would crash because I was just over that 1 gram per milliliter mark. So it's a balancing act. So if I'm being frank, some post-injection pain is completely unavoidable. So if you can see where I'm going with this, the concentration is the issue for pain. And what happens is you inject it, and then a couple of days later, you have some pain in that area. So again, officially, my product is not to be injected. It's a topical product, but the guys that are going to experiment with such things and, not use the risk meter, just be aware that what applies to a low concentration thing is not going to apply to a high concentration thing. You're going to want to use 0.25 to 0.33 per injection instead of 0.5. You want to pull that down a little bit. And what you want to do if you're trying to get 150 milligrams in a day, which is about the sweet spot, so that would be half a cc. So I would do 0.25, 0.25. If you want to go a little higher than that, no big deal. Go 0.33 or 0.33. Just be aware that the deeper into the fat you go, the less painful it's going to be. So if you're absolutely ripped and lean, this is not the product to use. It's not the product to use for that anyway, because it's a muscle growing product, not necessarily a fat burning product, okay? But you have to have a little bit of fat to inject into. You don't want to put this right under some thin skin, and you definitely don't want to put this into muscle. You won't even feel it for a day or two in your fat, but then you'll have just a little soreness. So just wanted to give everybody a heads up, especially the guys that have already purchased this topical product and are about to use it. Heads up, use your best judgment. And if you really feel that it's just not going to work for you, you hit me up. I'll be happy to refund, because we're still really in experimental days with this. And so I thank you for taking this journey with me, but I don't want you to have to suffer because you're not as crazy as I am. All right, so we've used this graph before. It's pretty simple. It's from a study on here. And it's discussing the proposed mechanism of action for ecdysterone. And we can see here that it works through the MAS receptor and then down through the estrogen receptor, and I believe along through the IGF-1, the estrogen receptor pathway, essentially. So what I wanted to do with this product was cover some of the other bases that may come along, and so I've added DHEA just to activate mTOR, just to stimulate and to have a slow, steady drip to actually help along the process to complement the ecdysterone and the plant sterols that are in the product. So we want to activate mTOR, we want to activate the IGF-1/estrogen receptor pathway, and we want to actually stimulate insulin production, repair of beta cells within the pancreas, and lower blood glucose while we go, so that we can have increased nutrient storage and all the things we want while we're trying to grow muscle and activate that pathway. One final word on this is that this is not a steroid-like product. This is not along the androgen receptor. This is not going to work like steroids. This is very similar to slow-release oxytocin or a slow-release IGF-1 like Increlex. All it's going to do is activate the already harvested and prepared and fortified muscle stem cells that you already have dormant in your body. And it's not every single one in your body, it's just the accrued fortified stem cells that you've accrued over whatever time that haven't already been kicked off by an anabolic cycle or something of that sort. So, just like with IGF-1 and some of these other products, if you were to use them at the end of a high cycle, of a high steroid blast, it would do essentially nada, okay? What you want to do is use this occasionally for short periods of time when you're ready to really blast and grow, and then you want to have time where you're actually accruing those satellite cells, activating them, fortifying them through other means. We're going to have to get into that in another video because I had to go for now. But I've talked about it in some of my past videos. I'll try to put some links in the description and in the comments. Thank you for sitting through this with me, and stay tuned for how this shapes up and the kind of results that people are getting from this sort of thing.